Welcome to the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, TRAP. Please follow us and join in the conversation on Twitter @Advisor Podcast, where you can suggest ideas and themes you'd like the TRAP team to discuss. Also remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a 6 out of 5-star review on iTunes. Doing all this really helps us, which means we can do more to help you. Now let's head over to the studio for the latest pile of TRAP.
Yes, indeed, dear Trappist. Welcome back to what many people are calling episode 23 of the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, TRAP. My name is Lick Lincoln, and joining me as ever are the three other horsemen of the apocalypse, Carl the Voice Widger, Alan the Storyteller Smith, and Andy Hart. Now, gentlemen, we have a show packed full of absolutely nothing, so let's start unpacking it straight away with 3 high-energy reviews from the review meister, Mr. Andrew Hart.
Does anyone else on the TRAPist team want to share with the listeners why we were laughing when Nick Lincoln just came in then? Or are we going to nudge on as professionals?
We're going to nudge on because we're not talking about it, and we agreed that before you joined, so crack on.
Okay, I will continue with the reviews. The first review is from Kieran Rustage, invaluable for new entrants to the profession, 5 stars. I found this to be gold dust as a new entrant to the field. It's fun, informative, and it shows how you can take the profession seriously without taking yourself too seriously. I particularly value that there are 4 hosts with 4 sets of views. For me, hearing competing ideas and challenging one another is what sets this podcast apart. 6 out of 5 stars. Just make sure to grab yourself a very long drink. The next review has been left on YouTube. Like and subscribe, as they say. This is from @StuartMullin9922. Hey guys, having watched from the start episode 22 already, I can only say that this is excellent. Kind of like the Grand Tour for finance. I know there's 4 instead of 3 hosts, so I won't say who I think's who. As a 53-year-old punter, not a finance professional, I can only say that the content is very thought-provoking and it has some real nuggets, despite the glib reference to a certain other program. Very valuable stuff to a pre-retiree, but also put people at any stage of their financial journey. I look forward to many more episodes. Love the delivery style. Considering I think this is aimed more at professionals, I'd say that this is the best personal finance podcast out there, certainly in the UK. Thank you. 5 stars. That's from Stuart Mullin 992. Back to you, boss.
Wow, brilliant review. Stuart also has left
they're all great reviews, actually.
Stuart has left a question for us, which we will come on to in a future episode, a Trappist question. He's actually a pilot, so he really is in a different field to us.
Wow.
Right, okay, topical tidbits.
Proper professional.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Widger, Future You 2023.
Yeah, so I spoke before about, I think, one of our very early on episodes, maybe even the first one. We did Future You last year. So Future You, us guys have spoken about this an awful lot. And when we get together, it's kind of one of the main topics of conversation. It's like, how do we guide ourselves along with our clients in terms of, well, you're motoring along at 1,000,000 miles an hour, running your business, or you're a senior exec in a multinational, and the day comes where you either sell your business or you're retiring from the multinational. What happens next? Because money tends not to be the issue in terms of what happens next. So we decided last year we'd do Future You, which was all about, I suppose, getting yourself future ready. So making sure that you had all your ducks in a row in terms of what did the third act look like? You know, what were you going to do? So you're going to have all this time now, and what did it look like for you? So last year we put on a 2-day event in the Armada Hotel in Spanish Point in County Clare, an absolutely beautiful spot. And we had phenomenal feedback from the attendees, but we got some real feedback too. So straight up, we got some, I'd prefer if we had this, I'd prefer if we had that. So that's kind of adjusting our agenda this year. So this year we have different speakers coming along. We're going to do more, believe it or not, group activities, because last year we did there was an option on the Tuesday morning, the second morning, to do a swim in the sea. So the Atlantic Ocean, boys, no matter what time of the year you're going to do it, it's going to be freezing cold. But loads and loads of people did it. And then the other option was to do yoga. And then people were saying, well, on the first day, as usual, and we've mentioned this so many times, what people got most out of the event was talking to kind of peers, people they hadn't met before. So they would have loved maybe a group activity to kind of break down that little bit of awkwardness at the start. So we're going to go for a walk. We're thinking about doing a bit of chair yoga, would you believe, during the day. We're thinking about doing meditation. Nick, you would absolutely love all of this. So anyway, we're putting it on again. I'm so excited about it. My colleague Susan Walsh is kind of leading the project from our point of view. We're going to limit it to 50 couples. So we always want the partner, spouse, whatever it might be, to be there as well, because obviously, a business person or a senior exec deciding for themselves what they're going to do is pretty pointless. You need the people, your nearest and dearest, with you. And we find a lot, and we are going to do workshops on this year. These are the kind of topics that tend not to be discussed amongst couples, which that's just life, isn't it? Because life kind of runs away with you. So yeah, Future You is happening on the 11th and 12th of September. There is a link to the actual agenda, the speakers, that kind of stuff in the show notes. Interesting, last year, 2 advisors came along, right? And that's totally cool. So we don't mind if you're an advisor in Ireland listening to this and you want to come along. I promise you, there'll be nothing about Metas Ireland selling their wares. So so everyone is invited along, but limited to 50 couples. So excited.
Can I ask a quick question? A couple of questions.
Yes, of course.
I remember, I think it was episode 1, the proper episode 1 that we did after the intro episode, which was called, if I remember correctly, Carl's Big Event.
Big Event.
So that's how long ago it was. So it's coming round again, obviously. And I remember we talked about the price point for this. Remind us, what do you charge for this event?
So it's €1,000 plus VAT. I assure you, Metas Ireland will not be making any money out of this. But I suppose obviously we have to pay for the speakers. The hotel is beautiful and everything is covered amongst that. What we're encouraging people to do is, if you're running your own business, I think it's a valid business expense. And what we found, which has been really good, and we have a couple of people coming from various companies, the big corporates are more than happy. Everyone is looking to keep their best people. So if you have a 50-year-old who's now thinking about what does it look like in 5, 6, 7, 8 years' time for me, I think the corporates are more than happy to cover the fee. So we have had a couple of corporates did it last year, and they're sending different people this year. So the price doesn't seem to be a problem.
Is that per person or per couple?
Per couple.
Couple. Okay.
And interestingly, last year I think we had 70 odd people there, 74, I think, to be precise. And I think we had 4 or 5 people came on their own. And I know 2 of those are definitely coming back with their partner this year. So yeah, it's 1,000 whether you come on your own. It's 1,000 whether you bring your partner. And we really, really, really can't stress enough that this is for the duo. This is for the partnership.
And what's the ultimate sort of commercial reward for Metis? Are you winning new clients as a result? Are you sort of embedding existing relationships? What do you hope to get?
So yeah, as I said, we definitely don't make any money. It's a fairly significant cost for us right after we've paid for everything. But having said that, did we get new clients out of it last year? We definitely did. And that would have more than made up for the loss that we made on the event. But more, it's our commitment to, talking about stuff that's, outside of just the money. So if you're a real financial planner, if you're a lifestyle financial planner, for me, this is massively, massively important. And this is a passion for me. So that's, part of the commitment. If we keep turning up and doing this kind of stuff, I think people will start to believe that our messages are true, that we have integrity, and that, this is actually a passion. You're never, ever going to get sold a pension fund when you come in here. This is about lifestyle financial planning.
Got it. A couple of questions, Andy. Carl. First one is very basic. You can call it the third act. I'm quite a fan of that. What do you call the previous 2? Like school years, working years, and then retirement years? Just interested on that.
Well, I have to give credit to Geraldine Murphy, who spoke at the event last year, and she's speaking again this year. She's actually going to run some of the workshops. She came up with the term third act. I absolutely love it. We've been using it an awful lot. Like the previous one is the one that we're all in. It's the one that we all know, and that it's your working life. And I don't think you can necessarily break that down between your stages of your career. So do I have a name for it? I don't, Andy. It's the one we're all in, and it's where the vast majority of our clients are in.
Final question. Any of our listeners flying over from Norway, do they get a discount?
Send me a DM. Good question.
They're paying in krona. There's a thing in I think it's just the UK, but there's something called third age
U3A.
university.
Yeah, third age. Yeah.
U3A university third age, which is focused on this, right? This kind of transition from work into retirement, semi-retirement, and I don't know too much about it. I've certainly heard of it. So it's
my
along
mum
that
does quite a lot of events. My mum does quite a lot of events.
Just in if I could just give you a very kind of overview in terms of the agenda. We have some people who've been there, done that, and are kind of living their best lives in the third act. They're going to talk about their experience. We've a couple of people who transitioned into consultancy. They're going to talk about their experience. But then we touch on stuff that, people probably aren't that exposed to. So we have a kind of a fitness and nutrition expert, Joe O'Connor. He's amazing, and everybody always wants to hear more from Joe. We have a psychologist talking about, your mental fitness. So it's not just kind of one particular theme. It's trying to get, a broad spectrum of the TED Talks, right? So it's, 25, 30 minutes from each speaker. And people then have engaged with some of the speakers after it as well. So I know the speakers have definitely got a few clients out of it as well. So it's a kind of win-win for everybody.
Sort of final point, a bit of a compliment. It sounds amazing. I don't think there's anything like it in the UK that I can think of that advisors run. I mean, this is a franchise formula almost. You can run this in major cities anywhere. I remember when I first started working, there was a guy that ran these sort of courses in random places like, council offices and, places where there's a lot of people approaching retirement. And he used to do it on the basis of, helping them out with their final salary pensions. But he used to cover quite a lot in it. And that was just like a room full of sort of 15, 20 people. This sounds a lot more sort of organised.
There's definitely pre-retirement courses. A lot of the big corporates do organise pre-retirement
employee benefit
courses,
type stuff.
Like a day or half a day, similar to this, but it doesn't sound anything remotely as attractive.
Anywhere near as good as this, yeah.
As this, which is far.
This sounds to me like this is something that is unique to Ireland.
And they'll also see that I was deeply uncomfortable with the content of some of today's podcast, owing to the Irish versus UK cultural differences.
That's Nick's way of saying let's move on now.
Let's move on. He's not happy about saying that.
Too much
talk about yoga and meditation.
I sang that song recently, and one of my UK counterparts told me to stop singing it. I was very offended. Anyway, look, if anyone wants more information, the link is in the show notes, or send me a DM. I have tons and tons and tons of UK advisors linking in with me on LinkedIn. So look, happy to share any more details. And as I say, everybody is welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl. So next point of the topical tidbits, Mr. Smith, the DFA Matrix book 2023.
Yes, perhaps on to rather more mundane issues. I don't know if you guys have spent any time looking at this. Dimensional fund advisors, we've mentioned several times on this podcast in the past. We all use them to one degree or another. They publish this thing called the Matrix book every year. And you can get access to it. You can get hard copies of it. You can get digital copies of it. Honestly, I'm not somebody that's sort of deep in the weeds on the minutiae of investment. I know some people are. One or two of my colleagues are, and they love all this stuff. But I think it's well worth spending some time. They just released their latest version of it. So they've got data, investment market data going back, to the 1920s across all asset classes, all sort of shapes and sizes of investments. And of course, Dimensional's big focus is on what they call factor investing. And so, returns from small cap equities, returns from value equities. And there's a ton of stories within them. They thoroughly recommend that you bring this book into client meetings. You use it to tell stories. Within the book, there are, at any time, there's probably half a dozen different kind of narratives. People, for example, talk about real estate or property investing, and they unpack the hard facts and the figures going back best part of 100 years. Dimensional do publish, I think they've got a specific webinar on how to deliver this. They're very big on what they call scripts and sketches and storytelling, and using this almost as a kind of a supplement to help clients really kind of understand and sort of get their heads around, particularly in the more recent times where we've had rather more volatile markets. So I put I think it's available to anyone if you want access to it, certainly the digital version of it. So I'll put a link in the show notes. If anyone wants to have a look at that, if anyone's particularly inclined to look at data, facts, information going back many, many years, it's worth looking at the brand new version of the Dimensional Matrix book.
But Carl, your hand was raised, and I'll go after you, Carl.
Yeah, so it's a brilliant book. It disappoints me every year that it comes out the end of June, beginning of July, when the figures are only up to the end of the year. Come on, Dimensional, get it out earlier. Anyway, it is a brilliant book, and I know we're going to talk about later on in terms of trying to, I suppose, coach clients and making sure that they're comfortable with volatility. There is an absolutely brilliant page towards the back every year, and it has like long-term returns if you're in a 60-40 or an 80-20 or 100% equities. And they have a number that we focus on an awful lot when we're talking to our clients, which is the lowest one-year return since kind of 1985. And for me, it's really important to focus on that number when we're talking to clients to say, here's the long-term average return. Say it's, 6.5%, 7% for 60-40, whatever it might be. Don't kill me if those numbers are wrong. But I know up to last year, the lowest one-year return was, I think, something like minus 26%. So it's a great tool in terms of coaching behavior with clients to say, this is why we're putting you in this. This is the long-term you are going to get. But you need to absolutely remember that you need to stay in your seat and do nothing when we have, not if, when we have that minus 24% year. So it's a fantastic book. And it is it's getting better. So, I've been using it maybe for 4 or 5 years, and each edition definitely is a little bit better. So, highly recommend. And thanks for bringing it up, Alan.
Andy.
And then Nick, you go first, mate.
Okay. I do get a copy each year. I've never used it in front of clients. I'll be quite interested to see if Andy does. But I get it just because I think I need to have it. And I read there's quite a bit of copy at the front where they talk about the figures, and that's the bit I find interesting. But I wouldn't. For me, it's not something I'd use in front of clients. But I'm totally wedded to Dimensional, as you guys know, and the dear TRAPist probably know. Andy.
I've lost summers reading that book. It's the Investment Information Bible, I believe. And if you're early on in your career, find this book and consume it and go through every single page and try and learn as much as you can from that book. In my early days, I did use it in front of clients with some success. I shared the digital copy with financially investing literate clients, and that's, again, gone down with some levels of success. I know that's probably not allowed, so I'll retract that statement. And then my final point is, isn't the sort of global CEO of Dimensional a close personal friend of yours, Alan?
Well, funnily enough, I was just going to mention that. Now that you said, me and Dave, we go back. Oh my God, we go back nearly 2 weeks now. I did have lunch with them about 5 years ago. No, I was.
It's the only reason he's put that on the bloody topical tip.
No, actually, it wasn't. But you have reminded me, and we are in topical tidbits, this is topical. Yes, I happened to be at Dimensional's office a couple of weeks ago. It was 10 days ago, and I had the opportunity to meet with, and he's the Oh, here we go.
Grab yourself a drink, a very long drink. It's story time with Alan Smith.
Nick, you're a bit trigger happy this morning. I don't know what's the matter with you. You're not your normal self here, because this is not a real story. However, and actually proving the point that we don't just throw this whole thing together. This is all kind of joined up thinking, because when it comes to later on in Culture Corner, I have some relevance.
Absolute shambles.
So I did have the opportunity to meet with his name is Dave Butler. He's the co-CEO. Dimensional got co-CEOs. There's Dave Butler, who looks after more the advisory side, intermediary side of the business, and there's an Irishman, Carl.
Gerard O'Reilly from County Waterford. It gives me a thrill saying it every single time.
Oh, he's good. Yeah, I've heard him on podcasts. He's savvy.
Yeah, he is, I think, officially the cleverest man in the world. He's just brain the size of a planet. And anyway, I had a meeting with Dave, and Dave is, I'm pretty tall, and I've got to stand up on my hind legs and look up to Dave. I think he's 6'8", 6'9", something like that. He's an ex-pro basketball player in the US, and he's a fantastic guy. And when I was speaking with them, and we were chatting about a number of other things, and I was hosted by my day-to-day contact, Stephen. Shout out to Stephen Greenfield. And Stephen mentioned the Trap podcast, because he had just finished his doing their foundations course, which Stephen hosts in London. And he said there was certainly a number of people there in the room, and the only reason they were there is because they heard of it through this very podcast. So it was quite nice to be sitting in front of the CEO of this global, $600 billion, $500 billion organization, and to be given some kudos and credit and thank you very much for all the good work that the boys on Trap are doing to educate and to help advisors learn more about the art and science of investing. And so as I was leaving, I said, nice to meet you all guys, shaking hands and all the rest of it. And I go out to the lifts, and then your man Gerard O'Reilly appears as well. So there's me holding court, completely out of my depth, with the two global CEOs of this organization. And all I was trying to do is get out of the building before I embarrassed myself and said something stupid. So I think I just about made it through. But they are very appreciative of the good work that we're doing on this podcast. There we go.
Nothing happens by accident at Dimensional. That was probably strategically planned, Alan. Slick operation.
I think it probably was. Yeah.
Anyway,
just for clarification, you said I was trigger happy with the storyteller drop there, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Okay. Moving on. Me. Good. Personality test. Yes, I did a personality test. I don't know what triggered it. No. It's coming this morning via Amazon.
Computer said no.
Computer said no. I did a test called, and the link's in the so-called show notes, understandmyself.com. And I was trying to get the other three horsemen of the apocalypse to do the same test, but of course, being the disagreeable buggers they are, none of them have done. And on that point, I scored in the bottom 2 percentile on agreeableness. There are 5 traits. And what does it say? People that hold on a second. Yeah.
Are any of us really surprised? He was in the bottom 2%.
People high in agreeableness are nice, compliant, nurturing, kind, naively trusting, and conciliatory. People who are low are not so nice. This is worth paying for, isn't it? Stubborn, dominant, harsh, skeptical, competitive, and in the extreme, even predatory. However, they tend to be straightforward, even blunt, so you know where they stand. And I would just I'd be interested to know what other advisor traits are. Yeah, of the 5 traits, I was in the bottom 2 percentile for agreeableness. I was high in extroversion, very high in conscientiousness, low in openness, and high in neuroticism. So I'm all over the shot, really. You guys don't know.
So you're a disagreeable neurotic.
On my openness, Nick, I'm 98. I'm 98% of my openness.
Oh, we know.
Yeah, we do. 5 pints and 3. 5 pints and 3. I'm the other extreme, and I think I am relatively open.
Right. I can give you the greatest ideas ever, and you shoot them down for about 5 months, and then you embrace them on the 6th month.
And you adopt them as your own. So you've done it. I haven't. So Carl, you haven't done it yet, have you? We should do it. I'll do it. I'll do it later.
Yeah.
Share the results.
I'll do it. Yeah.
We can't. We will never compete with Nick. I know for sure. Before you do it, Carl, you will not be in the bottom 2% in the same way as Nick is. But that's a bit of fun.
I did try. I think it just depends to a degree on the mood you're in when you do it. That will influence. But I did try and be honest. I wasn't trying to just give silly answers to get silly scores. But I don't mind actually reading through the notes in a bit more detail. I think being disagreeable has a lot of benefits. And 7 marriages in, I think it's working for me. Right, on to the next thing. We have, who's the next one on the topical tip? It is Mr. Smith again. So the Schroders Adviser Pulse 2023 report.
Yeah, okay. This is just something that apparently Schroders obviously are a major player in our sector. And I think they do this 2 or perhaps even 3 times a year. I just saw it for the first time the other day, so I took the opportunity to read through it. So Schroders survey, I'm not sure, it's not the biggest sample set, but it's certainly in the hundreds of advisors, and ask them, what are the key issues? What's on their mind? What are they debating? What are they concerned with? And I posted a link to it in the show notes. A few things that I'll just share, which some were obvious and some were slightly surprising. So the first thing was that there's concern out there about capital loss, about clients and advisors advising them discussing loss of capital. And that, in terms of all the conversations that we have, I think that's even concerning that's a big issue.
Yeah.
And I'm always reminded of what's the Nick Murray saying about capital loss? That permanent loss of capital in a well-diversified portfolio is a human achievement for which the market itself is incapable. Markets are incapable. The markets cannot have permanent loss in a well-diversified portfolio. A human certainly can. So the very fact that that's a big concern right now is a concern in and of itself. Second thing is obviously cost of living crisis, etc., is sort of looming large. And something that I think Andy mentioned last episode, but what there is, and I get this as well, and we're experiencing as well, this, whereas the client themselves might be doing okay, there is issues around helping family members. So if a family member is suffering, or can't afford their rent or the mortgage or whatever, then a lot of our clients are looking to withdraw capital to support family members. That was had increased significantly recently. You're like this one, Nick. The interest in sustainable investing has fallen precipitously. Only 6% of clients are currently asking for it, remotely interested. And it's fallen. I can't remember what the percent was before. Much higher than that. And interestingly, the reason that's cited is because investment performance has fallen away for sustainable investing. If you look back a couple of years, a lot of the sustainable companies, or those which were considered ESG, were the big tech companies, weren't they? Where a lot of those companies were predominant in it, and so therefore, maybe people weren't quite so interested in the sort of the basics around ESG investing, but more the fact that they were having some good investment returns. Do you want to come in there, Nick?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny, isn't it? When people have got real concerns, like maybe helping out family members or helping out themselves because of inflation, or when they're worried about a real thing such as a war in Eastern Europe, all these wokey things just fall by the wayside, don't they? People don't really give a shit. Carl, and then we'll back to Alan.
Yeah, there's another reason for that, I think, and that's, I think people are a lot more educated these days because information is to hand. And I think the whole greenwashing by the fund management industry has been exposed. And I think when, rules and regulation and criteria are put in place and funds either tick boxes or they don't, that's another reason I think that it has fallen behind.
Okay, let me just close this then back to one. I mean, and the fact that these massive, Vanguard have pulled out of this ESG nonsense in terms of these conferences they go to and so forth. And anything that's involving BlackRock, just treat with ultra care. And Larry Fink, this BlackRock CEO, who's the main driver of this ESG crap, look where it's coming from each time. Alan, back to you.
Yeah, exactly. 2 more brief points. As we know, consumer duty is looming large. It's due to be implemented at the end of this month, actually, end of July. 59% of advisors say that consumer duty will or has forced them to change their pricing structure, particularly around their ongoing recurring fee structure, which I think was one of the key issues that the regulator was wanting to explore that not everybody needs an ongoing paid for service. So for 59% say they have changed or they're in the process of changing their fee structure. Doesn't say to what, but that I found quite interesting. And last but not least, of course, currently I can't have a whole episode without mentioning those two magical letters.
AI.
AI. Interestingly, only 8% of the advisors surveyed expect to use any sort of AI tools within their practice in the next 12 months. As it extends out to 3 to 5 years, obviously those numbers go up. But only 8%, which I think is pretty small, expect to be using any sort of artificial intelligence in their business.
Well,
which shows you it's yet to be sort of mainstream by any stretch.
I think they're already using it, but don't realise. Anyway, let's not focus too much on that.
Maybe. Yeah, that was it. There was a few other points in there as well. So that was the Schroders Adviser Pulse report. And again, I posted a link to it if anyone wants to take a look.
Lovely. Carl.
Quick question, Alan. We don't have consumer duty, as you know, but we'll probably have it in a while. Is there any indication? Are they saying that the fees are going up or going down as a result of consumer duty, or is
down?
No, I think there's more sort of conscious thought is given to, because the historical was just a default. Whatever it was, it's 3 plus 1.
3 plus a
now
half.
What's the question? 3 plus a half, 3 plus 1. Now, what service do you want? So I think there's a bit more focus, which is the right thing to do. Any sort of commercial enterprise needs to understand its value proposition, and I think that this is one of the key, as I mentioned a minute ago. It's one of the key things. You can't default to automatically charge a recurring revenue model for an annual meeting that a client doesn't want or need. They really wanted a piece of work done for them as a one-off piece of activity, and whether you choose to do transactional work or not is entirely up to you.
Okay,
but not everyone. So I think that's what I just think a little bit more conscious thought given to pricing is coming to bear, which is the right thing.
Okay,
Andy.
That's a good subject for a future show: transactional versus ongoing. So let's park that. We'll come back to that. Back to you, Nick.
Okay. Yeah. But I think it's also. I think these things all interlap, don't they? In this thing of ours, I think it's about filtering and having an onboarding process. And if you're very careful with the vetting of people you bring on board, you shouldn't have problems down the line, which we'll come onto in the meat and potatoes. But also you bring people on who fit your service proposition. This is what I do for all people all the time. And if you don't want this, you don't get on the boat. You don't come on. You're not part of the squad in the first place. So once again, if you know what you stand for and what your service is about, offer that to people and they either take it or they leave it. Okay. But if they come on board wanting that service, they pay for that service. So, what's my thing? Oh yeah, it's kind of regular. So my company year end was last week. So I've had the double-headed joy of doing my regulatory data, which because I'm high in conscientiousness or I'm just neurotic, I just need to get it done. I hate stuff being in my intro. So I got the email from the FCA today and I did it this morning. In fact, I did some of it yesterday. Done my RegData as a one-man band, thank heaven, for things such as Zero and Free Agent. And I managed to do the 12-month year-end RegData on formerly Gabriel, still awful. I did it in about an hour and a half, and it's just such a nice thing to get off my shoulders. But without having an online accountancy package to there for me, it would be an absolute nightmare. And for you guys, Carl and Alan, with maybe even multiple cost centers in some cases, but certainly multiple RIs and KPIs all over the place. And I dread to think what it was like. But of course, I've also, because it's my start of my company year now, I've had to go through all my compliance documents as well. I've done that this morning since 6:30ish. Just spent 3 hours cracking on through this stuff, most of which is complete. I know why certain people think we have to do it, but I'm a one-man band and I'm having to vet myself and say I'm fit and proper and all this other stuff. It's just like, it's so Orwellian. But now I just close the sort of thinking part of my brain down when I do this. Don't get upset. Don't be disagreeable. Just do it and nail it, and I've done it. But wow, 12 months.
Well done, Nick. Obviously, I haven't had to do one of these for years, thank God, because it's twice a year, right? You have to do this, and it would take you an hour and a half. It used to take me
3 days,
half a day. Well, it started off into the best part of a day when I first started to do them. When they first brought it in, I got used to it a bit. that thing is you've got all these different sort of data reports, and they've all got to sort of cross-reference each other. You hit the button, and then you do it, and it goes, no, 0.674 doesn't match 0.12.
Well, sometimes Christ. It doesn't even tell you what the error is. It just says you got an error and you got to find it. It's just really ridiculous.
No. I mean, it would take a lot longer if I ever had a complaint, because thankfully, and I'm putting myself in a complete position to get one here, but I've always been able to say, have you had any complaints? No. And then, but if you've got a complaint, this thing goes on for like War and Peace. It's just never ending. But so that would be, that would be hours of your life wasted.
And whilst we're on this, Nick, I mean, I don't think any of us had this, but there's another sort of data request come out just last week or 2 weeks ago, wasn't it, from FCA? About retirement planning?
Alan, can we just not that you know this, Andy and I had a thing, a WhatsApp back and forth saying, please don't mention this because none of us have had it yet. And if we just mention it, the gods will, 86 questions. We know people that spent literally 5 hours on it, but we're not going to mention it. Okay. It's like Hamlet. Right. We don't just, it's
just
the Scottish questionnaire.
Pretend I didn't mention
it. No, it's the Scottish play, Nick. Have you got the wrong reference here?
Yeah, exactly. Not Hamlet, you clown.
Don't say it. What is it? It's Hamlet, isn't it?
The Scottish play.
Macbeth.
Oh, you just said it. That's it. Expect a phone call from the FCA this afternoon telling you to do your 5 hour report.
This
Hamlet, Macbeth.
Don't say it. Stop
it. Sorry, I said it again. Absolute shambles. Right. Okay. I think we've done the topical tidbits to death, have we not?
What about the last one?
Andy, Google show notes. We've nudged to next month. It's a live document, Alan. Right. So I think we should go on to what many people are calling the meat and potatoes of the show. And this was a subject raised by the estimable Mr. Widger, the voice, on the subject of dealing with, his words, dear Trappist, problematic clients, red cards, yellow cards, or just human nature. So sin bin or sending off. Human nature, or is it part of our job to deal with these people in the way that we think appropriate? Carl, you lead off, and we'll all have some input onto this subject, because it's a big one. Again, it comes back to making sure you've got the right people on the bloody squad in the first place. Go.
Does it?
It does.
We talk about this quite a bit, I lead off by saying Meadows Ireland would be much less draconian than Nick Lincoln or Andy Hart, and I think Alan would be probably more aligned to me, but I'm not going to second guess where everyone is going to come from. So my starting position here is, as I've told the story loads of times before, I was a product seller. So I know which best pension fund is for you, blah, blah, blah. And then I transitioned, when I saw the light, to real financial planning, lifestyle financial planning. So therefore, at that time, I had to transition my entire book of clients across from the old way to the new way. And that took a long time. And some were happy to come across and do financial plans and kind of, bought into, okay, this is different, but I get it and I'm loving it and it's fantastic. But others used to still come in 2, 3, 4 years later. Let's talk about the returns and how did my fund do? And my mate Billy down in the pub did better. So can we move and all that kind of stuff, right? So therefore, I would see it as part of our job to coach, to cajole, to help clients to, as I would say, see the light and see, look, it's let's focus on the financial plan as opposed to the investment returns. And we spoke about the dimensional stuff earlier on, or whether you want to do Vanguard or whatever fund you want to put them into. That's the driver for the returns that we have assumed in the financial plan. But that's all it is, and we need to focus on the financial plan. So, there's a couple of scenarios where, I would. I know Andy talks about the yellow cards and the red cards, and each for themselves. But I suppose you guys had a chance when you were setting up on your own to. I suppose you were going straight into this real financial planning. So it was possibly, I'm not making assumptions here, but possibly easier for you to decide on who you'd bring on and who you wouldn't. But we still get people in who say would have been recommended from somebody who loves the financial plan. And then they come in and they want to know, well, what did your funds do last year? Now, for me, that's just part of our job, that we're going to say, okay, I hear you. I'll show you what kind of returns you should expect. But what happened last year, the year before is absolutely, totally, and utterly irrelevant. So for me, that's a client with a particular issue or a particular pain point, and we're going to just bring them through the process and hope that, by seeing the financial plan, that they're going to go, oh, okay, this is a lot different, and I get it. Red cards for me are rudeness to me, tends not to happen, but rudeness to people on the team. We've had very few instances of it, but I'll pick up the phone and say, sorry, that's unacceptable. Do you know what? When I've done that in the past, which I think is probably 3 occasions, I've 2 of them certainly just explained where they were in their lives, they were having a difficult time, and we're more than happy to apologize and move on, and still clients now. But some people are just not very nice, and you don't need that crap in your life. So I would say, yeah, that's a definite red card. One thing that you guys have said before a lot is people who split investments. So say, okay, I'm going to give, if I have £1 million, I'm going to do $500,000 with Metas, and I'm going to do $500,000 with the corporate in Dublin. That's not a deal breaker, because you know what? We end up getting it all anyway. So for me, we're happy to kind of prove our points, because it is sometimes difficult for people to, get what the whole experience is after one meeting. It might take 2 years with your, 2 AGMs and maybe 1 EGM to say, do you know what? Metas are actually offering the best value. And then to elaborate on that point, I suppose, is if people are very, very, very fee focused, that is a problem. So I would say to the rest of the team here in Metas, if someone is you've delivered the plan, you've added your value, and they're still talking about fees, don't get too hung up or excited about that client, because they're probably going to go with the lowest fee. But if you have someone who's splitting the investment and they're talking about fees, and for whatever reason, the other firm delivers better returns, which of course that other firm are not delivering better returns because the market is just doing its thing, then they're going to go with the cheapest fee. So I would have, a massive red flags out for somebody who's just speaking about fees when you've clearly delivered your value. So that's kind of one issue that we just keep a very careful eye on, because I don't think that business is very sticky. But like 95% of the new clients that come in are coming in because they've been referred by somebody else who's had a real financial plan, and they're going, that's what I want. And the business is our business. And I know all of you guys as well, ours is really, really sticky. So our persistency rate is massive. But as we've grown, I'll be honest to say, over the last couple of years, we have had a few losses. And do you know what? That just is what it is. And I still take them all very personally. And for me, I think that's a good place to be, because I'm like, okay, how do we lose the client? Why do we lose the client? And what can we do better to make sure that doesn't happen? Sometimes you find that, well, this client was very, very fee focused or very, very return focused, and really it wasn't a great fit for us at the outset. So we do try, and our website is, trying to, I suppose, softly rule the people out who, don't align with our values. But we have our values, we know what our values are, and that's what we're going to deliver, over and over again. But I suppose if I can be, just put it into one word, we're commercial about this, and we're trying to, run a really good business, add serious value to our clients, but we're not going to be turning people away all the time just because they don't say exactly what we want to say and what we want them to say in the first meeting.
Okay, let's have Andy. You maybe you're responding to a point by Carl, maybe you just want to, because I know this is a big area for you, and then when you've spoken, then we'll go over to Alan and then me.
Yeah, just a couple of points just to keep it going. Maybe we need to get a jingle for Carl. Pour yourself a drink, but that was a good intro, Carl. Thank you. A couple of points. Carl mentioned one. About it, you do take it personal. Again, was said to me many years ago. I feel a drop coming here. Said to me many years ago, don't get personal in business. But it's very hard not to get personal in business. And I get very personal in business. And every so often I need to take a bit of a step back and think a bit more commercial about it. The other point you mentioned is when you lose a client or win a client, mainly when you lose a client, and a lot of advisors confide in me about this, I always say to them, just sort of journal what you could have done better, or you know, what would you have done in hindsight? When I say journal, I mean just like write it down, some key bullet points. Was the initial communication, you know, a little bit off? Was the first meeting you could have asked further questions? You know, just analyze your work like you would do in sport or something like that. I think that really helps. And also it gets it off your mind and off your chest, and you feel a little bit better about it. So they're the 2 points that you mentioned. Now specific points here, yellow and red cards. But Nick mentions it quite a bit, is the onboarding process. We're qualifying them, they're not qualifying us. Certainly if you have a established business with an amount of income coming in, you're not desperate as such. So you are qualifying them, they're not qualifying you. But then, so for example, I ask them quite a lot of high-level questions in the initial onboarding process. I have then an initial discovery meeting. A lot has now been sort of, discussed at this point. I then issue them our first 12 months, which is a document I've created for Hum Premium, but I also have it for Maven Advisor. I'm just trying to constantly set the tone. But let's talk about specific yellow and red cards. So the biggest red card for me is disregarding my advice. If they're going to ignore my advice and do anything which is financially self-destructive, to me, that is the biggest red flag, there is. And I have disengaged. I've been sacked. So I've lost 5 clients in my working career. I've disengaged 4, and one's disengaged me. They were all guys. They're all men. We're all in this ego battle with them about various different things. But I journaled the one that I lost, and then obviously the other 4 I disengaged, mainly because they were disregarding my advice and doing things that I didn't want them to do, and not taking the advice on various other things. So that's that point. I'll move over to some of the other guys, and then we'll come back to other couple of yellow and red cards. So who's next?
Let's go with Mr. Smith. Alan, you are muted. There you are. Well done, fella.
We'd be much more in line with Carl on this. I think the initial point, the world, we occupy a particular world which is actually relatively unusual across the landscape of personal finance in terms of our thought process, our long-term nature, the fact that we build a high quality investment engine to fuel the financial plan, but we focus less on the investment conversations over time. So I start from the premise that it's our job to educate clients on an ongoing basis, and we don't throw yellow cards and red cards around, because 364 days of the year they're getting bombarded with the opposite message. And so, they're only human, and every now and again they say, what about performance? Or what about something else? So over the years, we haven't disengaged with, I think, not many clients at all. I do think it's, as I say, our responsibility. I've mentioned before, another thing is, some people call it lifeboat drill, or a fire drill, or something like that. That you tell, and Carl's already mentioned a version of it earlier on this conversation, is that we tell clients, this is what will happen. The markets will go down. You'll have a down year. You'll have all you can do is keep reminding them of that. We did disengage with a client about a year, maybe best part of 2 years ago, because I remember, because they continually wanted us, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? And it's quite a difficult conversation to have when markets are all over the place. What are you doing about it? And the answer is nothing. We're doing absolutely nothing. That's a tricky one, really, because there's very few other things in life in the face of changing circumstances, emergency, panic, however you want to describe it. And the answer is to do absolutely nothing. Now, I start off by saying that's our fault. If the client's asking us that question in the first place, it is our fault that they haven't got it. They haven't understood that. We haven't been good enough with our onboarding process. I'm quite keen to consider there are different types of clients. Treating all clients the same is a recipe for disaster. So what we've tried to do in the past, we probably could do better at this as well, is almost segment clients into, when you're on board and you do a risk profiling questionnaire, your vast majority of people sit in the middle of that sort of standard bell curve. But there are ones who are very much out at the edge of it, who say, look, it does worry me when markets are volatile. So they should be kind of ring fenced and said, in the event of anything of volatile periods, we should be more on the front foot with our communications. And the other part of that segmentation is clients that have been with you, I would say, less than 2 years, less than 3 years, possibly. Because if you've got a client at one sort of end of that spectrum who's already told you that you do tend to get a bit skittish, a bit worried about investments, and they've been with you for a year, then we should be in the front foot. We should be more proactive. It's not their fault that they get worried. And for us to have this sense of arrogance that, The very fact that they sent you a polite email saying, should we be doing anything? Right, that's it. Red card, get off. No, so we don't do that. We don't do that at all. But there is one thing that we did, 10 years ago, that's just worth sharing, because I don't know if it's ever going to happen to any of you guys. We taught, Carl, like you, we were not doing full fat financial planning day one. We were doing traditional financial advice, recommending the best funds. And we built a business, an early stage business, on exactly that. Then we saw the light, and we shared the light and our vision with a lot of clients. And the majority of them got it, but a certain percentage didn't do. And in the UK, of course, we had our retail distribution review where we all kind of transferred across. And what that meant was we had to create a very clear client value proposition and fee model. We're no longer getting paid commissions in a traditional way. So over a period of time, we built that and we took it to our client base. And as I say, the vast majority really engaged with it. We're happy to sort of sign up to that new way of doing things. But a certain amount of our clients didn't. And a certain amount were, frankly, not commercially viable for us. And that's a tricky thing to come up against, because clients that you've taken on early on, it's not their fault that they're no longer, in terms of that, you're kind of loss making on them. In terms of the service proposition you want to deliver to them, because that's the way we do for every client, means that relative to the fee you pick up from them, you're going to lose. And we try to nudge fees up into a place that was commercially viable to us, and we got a bit of resistance. What we ended up doing was carving out quite a number of clients, quite a few, several dozen clients, and we packaged them up, and we sold them to another firm. Now, I packaged this up as a sort of a benefit to them, in as much as this other firm was happy to take them on an ongoing basis, and we no longer could. But I'll tell you, I get quite, believe it or not, I'm quite human and quite emotional about these things, because I never want to part company on bad terms with a client. And despite us doing everything and doing it I thought really well, and our communication was high quality, we talked about building a strategic partnership with this other firm who could serve them better than us. God, did I get a number of really kind of harsh phone calls from clients saying, you've fired us, haven't you? You fired us. And I said, no, we haven't fired you. We've introduced you to a firm that's sort of better suited to look after you. No, I hear that, but you've got rid of us. And tell you, Alan, we were there from the beginning, and it's not very nice. So we kind of did do a mass red card number of clients, and that still rankles with me now. I don't know what else we could have done, because those clients were not engaging with the service proposition that we then decided we wanted to offer. They didn't want to do it. They were commercially non-viable. So I think we did the best thing, but it was really difficult. I wouldn't want to do that again, which means that we are far more focused nowadays on taking on new clients, in as much as we hope they'll always be clients of ours, and we're never going to have to go through that process again. We will disengage because they are not commercially viable, or they don't like what it is that we deliver. So that was a salutary tale to anyone else. Now, Nick Lincoln's been sitting there quietly. I'm sure he's got views.
Andy, you're twitching your digit.
He's the goat of red cards.
Goat of the red card.
Nick.
Yeah. I really am not the goat of red. I'm the goat of onboarding, I think. I was thinking about this for the last 2 hours while the rest of you were speaking. I think I've sacked one client.
Disengaged this week. Disengaged, Nick.
Whatever, it's a word, doesn't matter. I've sacked one client. I've had people leave me, not again, maybe 3 or 4, but I've sacked one client since 2008, and it was for a combination of reasons. But I would think that's probably because I am just very careful. I'm a broken record, right? I started off as an IFA in 2001, working for a firm where they just couldn't say no, and they were jack of all trades. They were master of none. And 1 minute the directors would be doing a personal equity plan for £6,000. The next minute they'd be setting up a group pension scheme over here for XYZ Limited, and then they'd be over there with an endowment for Joe and Belinda, and it was just constant. And I thought, this is insane. You have no ideology, or you're just an enormous bucket, and just stuff is slopping in here, and you need to have a filter. So I've always been really keen about the onboarding. So I've never had a situation where I've had to sack a disproportionate amount of people. The one clients, the husband and wife, I sacked. They were perfectly fine, and we got on actually as people. Surprise, surprise, we did. But recurring thing that got under my skin, always on about the fees. Always on about the fees. Okay, so that was a little just tick, 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 tick in my neck. And then the big one, which Andy is the same one, they disregarded my advice. They needed some money. They wanted for whatever, I think, repay some buy-to-let mortgages. And they had ISAs and they had personal pensions and blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, well, you're going to take the money from your ISAs, okay, for these reasons. And they said, no, we want to take it from our pensions. And it was just intransigence. I thought, okay, you're nuts to do that. There's no reason to do it. You're going to screw up your inheritance tax by so doing it. So that was the second thing after the fees. And the third thing, they were very tech poor. And they were the one clients I had to send stuff in the post. Royal Mail.
That's a yellow flag.
They got email via this. I had to send emails to one of their children so they could then print them off. And then in the end, I said, this is just not working, and I got rid of them.
Nick, can I just sorry for interrupting. Can I just ask to, maybe this is getting into too much detail, but I'd be interested to know how did you let them go? Did you meet them? Did you write to them, or what was that conversation like?
I sent them an email, knowing they'd never read it because I'm too afraid to have these confrontations. But then they come back. No, I sent them a letter. I sent them a letter saying this is plainly not working. I'm resigning the account. I can't remember the exact words I used. Thank you for your custom over the years. I wish you all the best going forward. And I never heard anything back. Turned off the taps they were with funds networked on that day. Turned off the advisor charging, and moved on. And they're about for me. They were about $5,000 in fees a year, in advisor charging a year. So they weren't penny ante people, and they were in themselves reasonably pleasant. But it was just too much. It was just too much, and it just broke the camel's back. Yeah.
Another couple of yellow red cards just to get the juices flowing. Yeah, I think you alluded to it, Nick. Yeah, sending instructions rather than seeking advice. Like, this is what we're going to do. It's like, no, this is what we're thinking about planning on doing. Are there any other alternatives we've not thought about? I'd like your input, Andy, rather than saying we thought about it and here's the answer. So for me, it's a strong yellow when it's sending instructions rather than seeking advice. The rudeness thing that Carl mentioned, I mean, there's zero tolerance for that. So rudeness, demands, abuse towards me, staff, anyone, that's just immediately gone.
Yeah, it's kind of given, isn't it? Yeah.
We've alluded to, that's a given. We've alluded to it where it's like sharing links to investment articles and have you thought about this? I know they're human and they might do this every so often, but for me, it's incredibly insulting. It's like sending Gordon Ramsay links to fucking recipes and stuff saying, have you thought about this? It's like, I live, sleep and breathe personal finance and investing.
Andy, the ultra crepidarian Andy, he knows about everything. Andy can't be told anything. His name is Andrew Hart. Andrew Hart.
In the age, Andy, of instant information and constant information, is it not just human nature for people to go, I was just wondering about this, bearing in mind that they have a little information. Like I yellow card because someone sent you an article. Like, whoa.
Well, when I say yellow card, Carl, it's just a mark on their file. I don't go, here's your first yellow card. Be very careful. I mean, sometimes I do just tongue in cheek, so they understand what's going on. I think it's rather insulting, Carl. I live, sleep, and breathe personal finance and investing. I spend thousands of hours thinking about, discussing, reading, researching, listening to. Like, if there was anything to happen, I'd be on the front foot, communicating with them. But again, it is all back to the onboarding process, as Nick said, so to make it very clear to them about this. And a lot of my clients come to me from the content I create, so they know sort of my message anyway. And a lot of them say, Andy, I was concerned about X, but I just had your voice in my head saying, don't worry about it and just move on. That's fantastic. Your point, Carl, about bombarding of information, again, it's frictionless for clients now to send grenades into our practices. As I often say, a client can literally park their car in the car park at the station. On the way towards the station, 30 seconds, they can write you an email that's going to ruin your morning. And it's taken them 28 seconds to send that email. And they just think it's a passing comment, like, oh, a little bit concerned about this. And you're like, whoa, what is this, a complaint now? What do I go with this? Who have I got to speak to about this? Do I check their investment portfolios, or will they originally investigate? Who's the advisor looking after? It's just, the low friction is obviously a blessing and a curse. A couple of other yellow flags for me: not taking out the right insurance. If it's very clear you need income protection, if you get hit by a bus, you and your family are in a bad situation, and you're not willing to spend, peanuts every month. Like I'm going to nudge that on maybe to the following year, and then maybe you get a third year. On the third year, if you're not taking it out for not valid reasons, again, I don't want to be co-pilot to a financial sinking ship. We've seen the outcome of the wrong insurance, or not any insurance in place. So that's another one for me. I mean, the one we can discuss is splitting an investment portfolio. Go on, Alan.
Yeah, I literally just about to ask you that in terms of what you do. Carl said that they would do. We historically have done. We've learned to our cost now that it's just a nightmare to do that. We're going to give you some money and someone else. I can work with the concepts. I think we talked about it here before, the family fortress and the investment playpen. If you want to take a small amount of money and go and dick around with it yourself, or your mate's little hedge fund or whatever it might be, sort yourself out. But not, we're going to give you half. We're going to give this other big national brand half as well, and we'll see who does best. We'll compare them next year. That is a red flag from day one. So we will no longer will do that. We have done it in the past. So
give you a scenario. Most of our clients come to us because they already have existing portfolios, and someone has said, you need to talk to these guys. They do it differently. So we do the financial plan, and someone has 500 grand in a trading account, but there's a clear and defined need for a PRSA, which is a pension pot here, and we'll do the pension pot for them. But we won't insist that they transfer the other 500 grand across to us now. So that's more the scenario that we get. But what will happen is, a year, 2, 3 in, they'll go, can you just look after that thing as well? So that's really more our experience. But I don't tend to get people coming in with, 5 million quid. We're going to give you 2.5, and we're going to give them 2.5. But has it happened? Yes. Did we take the business? Yes. Have we won the rest of the business? Yes.
Yeah, we've all had different experiences of this over the years. Yeah, I'm very strict on this. I've been sort of Nick Murray'd in this. It's all about would an army general look after half an army and split an army? There's no chance you're going to win any battles. There's no chance you're going to win any wars. I think it's a sign, in my opinion, of a weak advisor who's willing to do that on the other side. So if there's another army general in the mix, and he or she goes, yeah, I'm willing to take half, and I go, no, I'm not willing to take half. And when I say I'm not willing to take half, I think that shows more of my character. Like, I'm all in on this with you, or I'm all out on this with you. Whereas this one says, I don't mind doing half. And I'm quite strict in that. That's my opinion on it. And we've heard other people. So Nick, over to you.
Okay, I think we can probably just tie a bow on this, unless you guys disagree with me on it.
I can't leave that one hanging out, right? So no.
He basically just said you're a terrible advisor, Carl.
Nick, what's your opinion he said that Carl comes back?
No, he wanted to tie a bow on it, so he doesn't have an opinion on this one. So if you don't mind, I'll reply to your comment, right?
Great.
I think that's when you're in the business of growing a firm, these scenarios tend to come up a bit. Do they come up often? No, they don't. Now, would we ever propose to a client that, hey, look, Mr. Client, it would be absolutely okay if you split that and gave it the other half to the other investor?
I never said you did.
To the other investment firm. Absolutely not. But if it comes to it where the client goes, look, we are totally new to this. We don't really know what we're doing. We really like what you're doing. But honestly, we're thinking not having all the eggs in the one basket, a bit of diversification. And we're just trying to protect ourselves, because I hear everything that you're saying, but would it be okay if we split this, or that we left our existing portfolio with the other house? Is that weakness or is that commercial? For me, that's not weakness. That's just us doing our thing. And to repeat, which I've now said 3 times, we end up getting all the business anyway. So, we're more than comfortable to do it. And I think if you're in the business of growing and expansion, I think you're just going to have to suck it up sometimes.
All your points are valid, mate. I spent at least 4 or 5 months trying to take on a new prospect client. 4 million quid. Everything was then agreed. Last meeting, they got LMR, last minute resistance. And they said, actually, we're going to keep 2 with the existing provider, who's an absolute DFM sharks, and we're going to put 2 with you. I literally just said, all the best, and just walked out. So yeah, I'm super strong opinionated on this. But yeah, all cool, all different opinions. Back to you, boss.
You know, I've just thought of a situation where we disengaged from a client 18 months ago, and we did it face to face with a husband and wife in a room, and it was just awful. Wife was crying. It was just a mess of the conversation, and actually, it was 50-50 in terms of the blame, because we should never have taken this client on. This is pretty big ticket client, revenue wise and everything else. But what they wanted us to do, we really couldn't do it. It was just, it was just a mess of offshore complexity and trusts and all sorts of stuff that we sort of said, to use an Andy Hart phrase in a derogatory sense, we'll give it a go. We'll give it a go. What, how difficult can it be? And it really was much more complex.
It was very, very difficult.
Yeah, it was just awful, and so that's another. I suppose all roads lead back to Mr. Lincoln, as always, Mr. Disagreeable, and commercial's one thing, but turning down, and credit to you, Andy, if you turned down a £4 million client, or in this case a £2 million client, if you're going to get half of it with a view to winning the other half down the line, I'm not sure. I'm half and half between, all credit to you, and also you're not commercial at all. You have still a £2 million client that you could have won across over the next year or two. I think in conclusion, it's client by client, prospect by prospect. We've got our value proposition. We've got the things that we won't stand for. I think we're all in agreement that, rudeness and just kind of downright being sort of negative or ignoring our advice are kind of yellow to red
questioning
cards.
Fees, constantly telling us about investments.
But there's a lot of grey areas in between the black and white, I suppose. But no, I think that's good conversation, really. Overall, back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Just to draw a line under this, just to repeat, I've only sacked the one client, so I might have this reputation of being disagreeable, and maybe I am, but I've only sacked one client, and I didn't particularly enjoy doing it, but I did feel better for doing it. And the second thing, I think we have a lot of younger Trappists, younger advisors who are in a sort of storming and forming stage, and they've got to be very commercial, and I get that. But if you're ever at the point with a client relationship, and you think every time you see his or her name on your phone or an email in your inbox, and your heart sinks, as soon as you are able to financially get rid, do not become a busy fool. Do not 20 years look back and with 350 customers in your client bank, of which a 90 or so don't like you and you don't like them because you haven't given them the time or the effort, or you just don't just get in the habit of recognizing that you cannot be all things to all men. Okay, down that road lies misery. Talking of misery, I see our posties at the front door. She's grumpy, and she's hauling a bulging sack of Trappist questions. Now, listen, dear Trappist, you know now how to do it, but I shall repeat myself. There's a pinned tweet at Adviser Podcast. If you click on the link in the pinned tweet, you too can leave an inane question for us to answer. And we will get through them. We're catching up, but we've still got loads of unanswered questions, but we only have so much time. So without any further ado, I think I'm going to cut the Trappist off and pull the first one out of the sack. And this is from Darren Bilkey, who's on Twitter as @Darren Bilkey. A large part of real financial planning undoubtedly includes cash flow planning, lifetime cash flow forecasting. I'd like to hear a big debate about the tools you use. In Carl's and Alan's case, whether all of your firms use the same tools or different ones per advisor or per client life stage, and what type of assumptions you each use and why. I think there's a big debate around this area. Clearly, there's no right answer. So how do you each approach this with your clients? Well, I'll lead off, and then we can make it into a big debate. Although we're 1 hour, 8 minutes in. So myself, Carl, and Andy, we are very much committed to Voyant. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but we're totally immersed in Voyant, and we are in, as much as you can love financial planning software, we love Voyant and have few issues with it. Right, I'm going to go to Carl in terms of how do you, across Metis Norway, how do you roll out the assumptions to be used, because you've got multiple advisors? How do you handle that?
So everyone uses the same systems. They use Voyant, same funds. We have a preferred providers list. We have an investment committee that meets, so they decide what everybody gets. So no two clients are treated differently, but their financial plan, of course, will be much different. In terms of the assumptions that they use in Voyant, I'm not going to actually tell you what they are because I don't know. But I do know that we have very conservative growth rates for investment fund growth. And our financial planning team meet and decided that. And there are very, we were contemplating, do we make different assumptions for inflation now or whatever? And they came to the conclusion, well, why would we do that? Because we're, long-term financial planning, inflation will be around this amount over, multi-decade investing. So we're comfortable with that. But we do kind of bring it up and talk to clients. Look, we've used this assumption for inflation. However, it hasn't been that for the last couple of years, but over the long term, this is what it will be. And anyway, we have a conservative growth rate for our investments. So yeah, everybody gets the same experience, the same service. Obviously, different advisors bring different styles to it, but I think that's super, super important if you have a lot of advisors, because it'd be a business nightmare, never mind a compliance nightmare, if you had everybody doing their own thing.
Okay. Andy, was your finger raised then? Or were you just having a fit? It was. Okay.
Yeah, finger raised. Obviously, this is my specialist subject. I'm not going to bore people with it. Whenever you're using a multi-decade compounding machine, be very careful, with great power and all that jazz. So I would recommend using simplistically cautious numbers. The three most important numbers in any financial forecasting tool is your inflation number, what returns you give to cash, and our cash drags against inflation, and then what returns you give to investments and pensions. My investments and pensions outpace inflation and very much outpace cash. That's the fundamental principles without telling you the specifics. Over to you, Alan.
Man, not a lot else to add on the projection numbers. To some degree, I mean, ours are set. I think I mentioned before, we retain the services of Albion, Tim Hale and his team, and they help work, capital market assumptions long term, and they've been the same for years. I think we've adjusted them down recently, but yeah, it's the relationship between inflation and capital markets over the longer term, and caution is the important word. And in terms of the tool and all tools, people get quite kind of excited about this, about Voyant or Cash Calc or whatever. And I would just say kind of doesn't really matter, whatever tool works for you. I mean, I've got the oldest the most longest established firm on this podcast. And so when we first adopted cash flow modeling, I don't think Voyant existed in the UK. I can't remember when it came to the UK, but I don't think it existed. But we adopted what was then called Prestwood Truth, created by the late Paul Etheridge, who's kind of considered to be the sort of grandfather of cash flow planning and financial planning in general.
Friend of yours?
No. Well, I met him once and did a joint presentation with him, which was he kind of showed me the ropes about how to present at an IFP conference, but that's a whole other story. But so we learned using that tool, and honestly, we didn't feel the need to change it dramatically. It's quite a comprehensive financial planning tool. More recently, obviously, new tools come to the market, and a couple of our younger advisors were really keen on Cash Calc, because Cash Calc was considered to be a sort of a quick and dirty version. You could do a sort of high level financial plan. You were never going to, it wasn't granular. You weren't going into detail, but if you're dealing with a younger client, which some of our younger team were doing, sort of peer group, people in maybe the 30s or 40s, it was deemed sufficient. And so we've been using that, and we've been using Timeline as well. That was initially designed for our people who were just going into retirement, wanted a lot more granularity about the projections, and using the sort of various tools that Timeline offer. So we've got a project on at the moment to streamline, because we really need to just sort of get ourselves behind one tool, because the answer is right now we use 3 different modeling tools for different reasons for different clients, and I think we probably need to streamline it more than we are doing at the moment. But overall, does it really matter? Is it something that you're familiar with, you can deliver, you can use competently, gives you the results, helps clients understand where they are trying to get to? I wouldn't get too excited. Understand one. I mean, Voyant probably have got the vast majority of the advisor market, from what I gather. Everyone I know uses Voyant, so it must be a decent tool. We've never got around to using it.
Okay. All right. I think we've given that sufficient depth. We're, again, 75 minutes. Okay, we've got 3 more questions. These are all joke ones, so they don't really need to respond. The first one is from Bill1, who's on Twitter as BillAnyone. So you can guess what he's like. Why do you spend so much time talking about client outcomes? Can you not focus on how we can make more money from our clients? If you'd like, I'd be happy to appear as a guest or send you my company brochures. That's a parody account, old school kind of thing. The next 2, though, these are genuine. This is from Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen, who's on Twitter at Llewellyn-Bowen. A question for Andy, please. Decorating my windows, and I was just wondering if I should consider the John Lewis Roman blinds or the Dunelm cream shades. Yours in eager anticipation. And then finally, Kieran Foley, who's on Twitter at Kieran Foley. Could we have a track special on the IKEA wardrobe design system? Perhaps with a guest panel of experts from the financial services industry sharing their experiences with this magical software. And in Andy's world, the IKEA wardrobe design thing is magical. You referenced it about, 3 episodes ago, Andy?
Yeah, I did. Just to pick up on your first sort of joke one, Bill1 is worth following on Twitter. You know, the jury's out of who is behind this account. Some very funny tweets, so it's worth following him. And the Twitter handle is Bill@_N_E_WANN for 1. So yeah, definitely worth following that. The final point is bloody IKEA gate. Is you didn't even let me finish my story. The whole story was IKEA off this service. Not you go onto their website. And
Okay,
just
let's move on to the culture.
No, let me finish
Come
this.
on, Chairman.
The final thing is, you do a Zoom call with an IKEA wardrobe expert. They build it all in front of you, and you don't have to do anything. It's all free, and then they email you the specific outcome of the call. Anyway, 2 advisors I know have already used it, so put that in your bloody vapes. Anyway, back to you, boss.
Okay, very good. Well, let's move on without any further ado to what many people call Culture Corner. And we'll lead off, Mr. Hart, with your More Perfect podcast.
Yeah, I absolutely love this podcast. It's probably my favourite podcast at the moment. It's made by the people that make Radiolab. If you know about Radiolab, it's called More Perfect. And it's all about the Supreme Court in America and how influential this court is. They've got 9 justices that have been, I believe, elected by all the presidents. And the things that they discuss are incredibly sort of nuanced, things around sort of religion, artistic expression. It's an incredibly insightful and interesting podcast. If you're into sort of story narrative podcasts, I recommend you check it out. It's called More Perfect. They had a load of episodes previously, and then they went sort of off grid, or they just closed the podcast down for about 5 or 6 years. But now they're back with a new series, and it's incredibly eye-opening. So yeah, definitely check out the podcast More Perfect.
Great stuff. Voice, the John McEnroe documentary.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. It's on Sky Documentaries, so it's a two-hour documentary on John McEnroe, and it was just from a sporting point of view. I really, really enjoyed it, but more from the kind of personal story point of view and where he was. I actually didn't realize he was as successful as he was in his earlier career, but then it was like the guy who was clearly the best player in the world had everything, and everything kind of went pear-shaped because he possibly had his priorities a little bit mixed up. And the John McEnroe now, he just came across as a fantastic guy, a clearly complex individual, but he was kind of talking about learning from the mistakes that he made in his earlier life and where he is now and where he sees himself. And it just fitted, I thought, just beautifully into our whole third act discussion. Is really, really, really well made. I loved it. But I think not only sports people should watch it. It's very, very interesting, and there's funny parts in it too. So yeah, well worth a watch.
Thank you for that. And if you haven't got Sky, such as me, you can get it on YouTube and so forth. But you have to pay a little subscription, or Apple TV. It's like £2.50. I will watch that because just the promo, which I did see on YouTube of him, playing with a wooden racket. It's like a different game. If he had the gear, and of course he's left-handed, which makes him just one step closer to God. Thank you for that, Carl. Storyteller, another sporting-related documentary, Air.
Just before we do, Nick, do you want to, as we're on a sporting theme, do you want to talk about cricket at all? Ashes?
Sorry, Alan, you're breaking up there, fella. So, Alan, you're going to talk about Air. No, I do not want to. Yes. I do not want to talk about Australian cricket. Full stop. I have a word for them. Which
Don't say it. Don't say it.
Yeah, I won't.
Say it.
I won't.
Right,
crack on.
Yeah, I really like. I've read a lot of sporting books over the years and watched documentaries. That intersection of sport and business, and kind of what we can learn in business from sport, and to some degree vice versa. I think this has been out for quite a while, but I've only recently seen it. It's the film called Air, AIR, which is actually now free and available if you've got Amazon Prime. And obviously, it's the story about. It's not so much about the kind of the Michael Jordan story. He doesn't really appear in it at all. It's about the whole story behind Nike getting him signing a contract to get what is now obviously a multi-billion business, which is the Nike Air Jordan shoes and all the sort of sporting range that went along with it. And of course, back in the days when Jordan was just finally first coming through the college basketball scene, was going to sign pro contract, the NBA. The big thing was who was going to sign him up for. Adidas were Converse, believe it or not. Converse were the number one basketball shoe manufacturer at the time. Adidas were a close second, and Nike were nowhere. They were a running shoe, they weren't a basketball game at all. And it's a really compelling story. And without giving the game away, I think there are lessons to all of us. If you are pitching for a new client and you're up against what would appear to be sort of bigger, better, more well-resourced organizations, how this guy, Sonny Vaccaro, who was the kind of the agent, the guy working for Nike, how he pitched and what he actually did to obviously, it's a known thing that Jordan eventually signed for Nike, which was the sort of the kind of the dark horse, if you like, the less favorite in the race. And he eventually signed up. But what he actually did to pitch to them, to speak to his parents, it's a really, really interesting story. Well worth watching. Called Air, the Michael Jordan film on Amazon Prime.
Okay, excellent. I think in the interest of time, we'll... Andy, now you raise your finger. Brilliant. Crack on.
A total random point. I'm keeping a list of words that Alan Smith pronounces at the most Scottish. And the two I've got, the front runners are recurring, and the other one is food. So we'll keep this tally going. Because believe it or not,
get some
Alan Smith is Scottish.
Some recurring food.
Let's get some recurring food.
Proudly.
Oh, good. I help it. Okie dokie. Right.
Absolute
So,
shambles.
Andy Hart, half Scottish, half Welsh, aren't you?
Half Scottish, half Welsh. Yeah, I'm a mongrel.
Depends.
We should probably just say today that the giddiness is as a result of the fact that the four of us met up last week. We'll just leave it at that. But
We'll leave it
apologies.
at that. We'll leave it at that.
There's probably a few in jokes that are
on that
not
note,
Trap abroad.
Dear
What
Trappist,
happens
that
in
is a
Trap
wrap for this
season?
episode.
What
Thank you, dear
happens in
Trappist, for your
Trap
precious
abroad
time and input to
stays
the
in
show.
Trap
Please
abroad.
rate us and leave a 6 out of 5 star review on iTunes. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. But until the next time, from the Trap Pack, it's adios and take care out there, folks.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.